Hello everybody. I was torn between just kind of drinking tea and hanging out with you all and seeing what comes up or going through some YouTube comments. So maybe we'll do a little bit of both. Just take a few moments of silence here. Hope you're enjoying the week before Christmas. I know not everybody celebrates Christmas, but I'm sure we can all feel the festive holiday spirit, which comes with lots of energy, whether you like it or not. There's something kind of top of mind in my heart that I want to share, but I never know how to share these things. I just kind of get into it, and hopefully what I want to say comes out. But I guess essentially I just kind of wanted to link up the relationship of the personal I and non-duality. There is no personal I, guys. It doesn't exist. This is God happening. And because we have to use language to connect with one another and sitting in silence, it's probably the deepest form of connection we could have. There's already silence here because this is appearing in silence. Silence is the backdrop of these words that are creating the images, that are creating the concepts, that are creating the communication that is being enabled through this modality, YouTube, and so forth. But I think for a long time, my goal with this channel was to reconcile the separate I with the non-dual recognition, because that integration simply wasn't occurring. There was a deep, inner, profound knowing of truth or being as it is, yet suffering was still playing out. Although, albeit it was not happening to me any longer, it was simply appearing. Nonetheless, all the energy from the awakening to non-duality kept funneling into that separate sense of I. And I didn't really like that, because my spiritualized concept of things was like, you know, what the hell? Where's the freedom? Where's the emptiness? Where's the love? And that was all there. I mean, it was all already there. It was the backdrop of everything else. So in a way, it was always integrated. It didn't need to go through these years of integration, but that's what happened. And so that's why Spiritual Shifts has been a recording and a witnessing of that attempt of consciousness to try and rectify or make sense of these energy shifts. Okay, and conscious itself is an energy, so in a way it's just trying to make sense of itself. But there is no separate I. It doesn't exist. When we talk about the separate I, essentially we are talking about God. We are talking about being. We are talking about presence. Presence is absorbing these words right now. Presence is absorbing these images right now. Presence is absorbing this moment right now. And this is a reflection or an emanation of itself. So when I talk about trauma and when I bring up some of these heavier aspects like shadow work, first of all, I see a ton of drop off, because as a society, as a collective, we are conditioned to suppress, avoid, and deny darkness. right? Darkness is the space in which suffering dwells. Darkness is where separation exists, right? Because that which feels separate is still unconscious. It's still not yet awake to it still hasn't flowered. Being still hasn't flowered through consciousness into a tangible, intimate relationship with itself and with everything. With everything. Because when it begins to include itself, when being begins to absorb and pull into itself this sense of separation and dissolve it, it's actually doing that to the entire world of the I, the entire external reality. So it is absorbing everything, okay? And the mind's like commenting on it and taking it personally, because most of these shifts are registered again in the feeling mental space. So trauma, it is essentially suffering. It's suffering. It's the stimulus towards enlightenment. It's the stimulus towards awakening. We cannot have awakening without it. Consciousness cannot shift without it. It cannot move towards its opposite, which is light, without the dark. Both are needed. They are intrinsically unified aspects of one whole. And we see this perfectly illuminated and illustrated in the Buddha story. I think the Buddha story is so beautiful. Basically, you have a prince, this boy that's been sheltered from the world, sheltered from any form of suffering, any form of darkness. And the minute he comes into contact with pain, the journey towards the seeking begins, right? The leaving the palace walls, the hero's journey, and the search for truth, the search for meaning, the search for the root of suffering. And we have the same kind of allegory with the Jesus story, right? The illumined consciousness. Except what's so beautiful about the Jesus story is that it basically, God, it's so perfectly illustrating shadow, right? It's illustrating shadow through all the different pathways that suffering took in Jesus's life, right? How speaking the truth is persecuted, right? How truth touches darkness, poverty. It touches the darkest places of the human psyche and the human realm. Disease. Anyway, the reason I'm bringing this stuff up is because what was so shocking and surprising, again, to me, was that there was a direct and immediate confrontation with shadow material. And so the years that passed by in no thing, in total emptiness and in total absorption, there was a foundation that was being set, a foundation that was being laid, a foundation of presence that was being solidified and anchored. That I didn't know that was happening. I can reflect now on it and understand more. But back then, I thought that was it, I thought, oh gosh, this is what probably enlightenment is. Just this total radical acceptance of everything. Wrong. So the next few years passed, and again, shadow, shadow, shadow. Dark, dark, dark. Things weren't getting better. Bliss wasn't a daily sensation. That's why so many spiritual teachers tell you not to get addicted to the highs, not to create images to what enlightenment is, because first off, it's so unique and individualized in every single person, right? And then secondly, the second part of that is that becomes an obstacle, because it's another form of clinging to an identity, the spiritualized, enlightened, awakened identity, right? So Shadow is the initiation in which consciousness gets to know darkness, gets to know separation, gets to know suffering intimately. It is so beyond, like if you're going through this, you might liken it to, some people call it the dark night of the soul, again, the hero's journey. But when you enter that realm consciously, the amount of excruciating pain that you are exposed to is beyond anything that I ever thought was pain. Okay? And so at a certain point, that started shifting into the awareness or the realization that this was collective material, that it was not separate from the whole, that I was actually touching universal pain, universal trauma, right? And so I equipped myself with the tools that I needed in order to process, face, and go through that path, right? Healing modalities, working with multiple healers, from shamanism to light work, stuff like that, transpersonal psychology. Presence is the critical ingredient for this journey. Nothing can happen without it, because presence is the loving embrace, right? It's that which embraces what is. So when something is awake, when presence is consciously embracing suffering, consciously embracing darkness, consciously embracing all the aspects of separation, it is only then when these things are able to transmute, transform, or also integrate. The other end of that is that still the journey didn't stop, right? That integration still wasn't the end. That absorption of the separate I into presence still wasn't enough. The process kept going. The next stage of that was that I had to face the darkness in my life, the darkness in my mother, the darkness in my father, the darkness in my husband, the darkness in our political system, the darkness in my body, in my health, the darkness in the healthcare system. All these unconscious layers were getting unpeeling themselves, revealing to me one level after another of excruciating, of the excruciating effects of separation. So when people go into these topics like non-duality, they're entering the underbelly of consciousness, because they're no longer, consciousness is no longer able to filter, deny, suppress, or turn away from what is. Okay, is this landing for you guys? Because this is so key right now. These shifts, you know, these different shifts that we go through on this journey. And what happens when we embrace darkness in ourselves and also darkness in the world is that we become a greater presence. We develop a greater capacity to be able to meet life in all its different variations and not judge it. Just the other day, you know, we were in the kitchen, my husband and I, and he was telling me how he was a little bit resentful that, you know, 2 years ago I made him give some bikes away, and that he really didn't want to do that because he had built one of the bikes on his own, and that he was trying to express to me that he still had resentment. And at the time, the reason he had to give his bikes away was because we were moving and we had too much crap, and I was really trying to minimize baggage. And he was, you know, kind and gracious enough to part with some of his things. And when he told me that, my immediate reaction was anger, because I was like, you know, going back to that period of time where I knew how much energy it took me to basically get us relocated, to get us in a different situation, lifestyle wise and so forth. And so I got mad and I walked away from that conversation, because I was like, no, this is an inaccurate perception of reality. Like, why are you still holding on to these material items? That's such an unconscious like perspective on what happened, you know. And I went, you know, in the bedroom, and this situation dragged on for like 2 hours of him and I back and forth rehashing like all these resentments we had towards one another. And then a light bulb went off in my head, you know, in my heart, and I realized that I wasn't giving him space. I wasn't giving him presence to have a voice in relating to me in this relationship, in this dynamic. There was no room for him, regardless of the content he was bringing up. I was not leaving any room for his presence, right? So immediately we went into that. Immediately we absorbed into that recognition and into that reality, and moved through that together. Another great example is when my mother calls me, you know, on a daily basis, and she's continually expressing things that are difficult in her life. And I can't tell you how many times I have to hang up the phone, because I'm like, you know, my capacity is just not there to hear all this complaining, to hear all this negativity, to hear all this gossip. Like, it's just, I don't want to be a part of that, you know. But again, there I was eclipsing her voice, eclipsing her presence, eclipsing her attempt to belong, right? I mean, we can all come up with countless examples in our life where we turn from darkness. We call it negativity. You know, the war in Ukraine, it's such a perfect example. Have we become desensitized to the rape, to the pillage, to the violence, to the potential end of democracy in these countries? Right? How many of us, myself included, come from a history of ancestors that went through incarceration, rape, violence and abuse, government suppression, poverty, and so forth? Who are we as present making contact, meeting life? That's why I get a ton of unsubscribes, or a ton of, you know, comments calling out how beautiful and flowery being in oneness is, and what a happy person I should be if I'm awake and enlightened, right? And life screams through my bones. It pours out of my eyes in the form of tears, in my voice in the form of rage. You know, and everything is alive. Everything is electrically alive in me. So I'm not going to sit here and give people a pretty looking version of non-duality, because then I would have to lie to you. I would have to hide. I'm not going to do that. And neither should you. Meet yourself. Meet the darkness in you. Meet the darkness in the world. Because who you are, this presence, this empty being, can take it. It can handle it. It has to meet these unconscious aspects of our being in order to evolve, in order to progress, in order to integrate, in order to complete its process of awakening. And one thing that I really want to say that I think is so key, is that it's not you doing this. It's not you working on trauma. It's not you seeking out healers. It's not you attempting to find reconciliation or peace or go to the other end of all this so that things can calm down and get better, right? Because we don't know if it's going to get better. We don't know anything. We just know that we have to be honest as possible, because that's who we are. We are the truth. We are the truth. That is our being. That is our essence. That is our nature. But it's not us doing these things. They're just happening on this path that I'm able to describe to you now because it's occurred. It's registered. It's been a direct experience. So I'm not telling you a story. I'm not giving you a narrative. I'm also not giving you steps or tips or ideas of how this is going to pan out. I'm just giving you a deep, deep inner calling to meet yourself, to show up, okay? To be real. To be real, people. With your coworkers, with your friends, with your family, with your loved ones, with people at the grocery store, at the post office, online. And I don't mean the whole like authentic, vulnerable, all that. No, I mean be real, speak the truth. Speak the truth. Be the truth. You are the truth. Show up like that for yourself. That's all you can do. That's the only thing you can do. Everything else will be a lie. Everything else will hurt. And not in the way that processing shadow hurts. In a way that lying to yourself hurts. And in a way that not meeting yourself hurts. You know, not looking. That's the most painful thing you can do, is not look. Just gonna close my eyes for a second.